Let me ask you something deep, something real. Have you ever wondered why a man, seemingly strong, silent, and impenetrable, can remember a single moment after intimacy more vividly than anything else? Not the act itself, not the words said during, but that quiet, sacred space after? Because it's not just a moment, it's a mirror to his soul. That stillness, that tenderness, that silence after the storm, it's where the unconscious speaks loudest. And when you understand what truly imprints on a man's heart after intimacy, you'll stop wondering what captures his devotion and start embodying it. So today, let's go beyond surface psychology. Let's descend into the depths, into the hidden places of the male psyche, where connection is either born or broken. Because what you do after intimacy, he never forgets it. Never. The human soul does not record life in sequences or timelines. It remembers by intensity, by symbolism, and by emotional resonance. What we think we forget, the unconscious mind often keeps alive in the background, quietly shaping how we relate, whom we trust, and what we fear. And in the realm of intimacy, where the veil between the conscious and unconscious becomes most transparent, what lingers is never just the physical act. It is the feeling that surrounded it. The emotional imprint left in the silence, in the breath between two bodies, in the energy exchanged when words no longer suffice. Men, often raised to suppress their feelings, to armor themselves with control and independence, paradoxically become most exposed in the aftermath of intimacy. Not because they wish to be, but because in that moment, their guard is involuntarily lowered. The conscious mind, tired and sated, retreats for a while. And what's left is something raw, something real, something ancient. It is in that very space, when the ego recedes, that the psyche receives its deepest impressions. You may think he forgets how you looked at him afterward, that your silence, your rush to get dressed, your disconnection went unnoticed. But that is the language of the unconscious. It notices everything, not logically but energetically. The part of him that remembers isn't the thinking man. It is the feeling man buried beneath decades of conditioning. That man registers your energy, your emotion, your intention, not with thought, but with sensation. And what he experiences in that space carves a lasting memory, far more enduring than the physical pleasure itself. Imagine for a moment how much is felt but not spoken. After intimacy, he is not just lying next to you. He is silently scanning, seeking signs of safety, connection, acceptance. Not because he is weak, but because for a brief moment he has opened a door he rarely allows to be touched. The memories of childhood, the longing for maternal comfort, the ache for approval, the desire to be held without demand, rise subtly to the surface. It is here where a man unconsciously seeks healing. Not in a conscious plea, but in the hope that who he truly is will not be rejected now that his armor has fallen. If you turn away, if you withhold presence, if you emotionally detach, he may not confront you. He may not even be able to explain the pain. But something inside will retreat. A quiet disappointment, unspoken but deeply felt, will begin to shape the way he views not only you, but intimacy itself. He may label it as discomfort, or say he's not feeling connected, but these are only the language of a soul trying to articulate a wound. And the opposite is equally powerful. If, after intimacy, you remain emotionally present, if you offer warmth, stillness, and undivided attention, you do something that penetrates far deeper than the body ever could. You affirm his worth in his most unguarded state. You say without words, you are not only enough when you're strong, you are still loved when you are open. And that becomes an emotional imprint he cannot erase. These moments do not scream, they whisper. And in those whispers, the unconscious etches meaning. Just as a child may forget the words of a lullaby, but never forget how safe it felt, so too does a man forget what you said but forever remember how you made him feel. The unconscious doesn't catalog events, it collects feelings, especially those that accompany vulnerability. The body may leave the moment, but the soul remains behind, absorbing everything. So you see, in the end, it is not about seduction, not about technique. It is about truth, presence, integrity. Because the way you behave in those delicate moments writes the script for how he will feel in your presence going forward. Will he feel at ease? Will he feel seen? Or will he feel used, misunderstood, or emotionally abandoned? These are not conscious decisions. These are emotional reverberations that shape his responses to you for days, months, even years. And perhaps that is the great secret of emotional memory, that what we call chemistry is often just the residual echo of feeling safe or unsafe in the soul's most naked hour. There exists within every man a paradox that few recognize and even fewer understand, the desire to be both invincible and deeply held. From an early age, he is taught to build walls, masks, personas. He becomes the provider, the protector, the one who never falters. And in fulfilling this role, he often learns to silence the very parts of himself that long to be comforted, affirmed and embraced without condition. Yet no matter how deeply these emotional needs are buried, they do not disappear. They remain hidden in the recesses of his unconscious, waiting for a moment safe enough, soft enough, quiet enough to rise. That moment often comes in the delicate pause after intimacy. It is a sacred and vulnerable space where the performance ends, the ego loosens its grip, and the unconscious begins to speak. In that stillness, his body has offered something more than physical release. It has offered trust. And whether he knows it or not, he is looking for reassurance. Not reassurance of your attraction or pleasure, but of his being, that he is more than useful, that he is more than his strength, that he is seen, even in his emotional nakedness, and accepted without question. But here lies the great tension. He won't ask for it. His conditioning runs too deep. He may even brush it off or change the subject, making a joke, turning away, reaching for his phone, anything to mask the quiet hope rising in his heart, that you might see past the surface and recognize what he cannot say aloud. He is silently asking, "Did I matter to you in that moment? Not for what I did, but for who I am underneath it all." This unspoken need is not weakness, it is humanity. The same man who stands tall in the world may feel small in that moment of emotional openness. And when that need goes unacknowledged, when it's met with distance or indifference, a part of him begins to recoil. He may not argue, he may not retreat physically, but something internal shifts. A subtle wall begins to rise again, and without even realizing it, he stores the moment in his unconscious as another instance where vulnerability was not safe. You see, after intimacy, he is not merely coming down from desire. He is stepping into a space where his inner boy, the one who was never told he could cry, who was never asked how he felt, is momentarily present. And he doesn't need analysis or fixing. He doesn't need you to fill the silence with words. He needs presence. He needs to feel that who he is in that moment, the real him, is enough. And this presence isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's felt in a single touch, in a breath shared without pressure, in the way your energy says, "I'm still here. I'm not turning away from your truth." There is a kind of alchemy in that presence. When a man receives reassurance not as a response to neediness but as an unspoken offering of love, something ancient within him heals. He begins to rewire his understanding of intimacy, not as a space where he must perform or earn affection, but as a space where he can simply be. This redefinition is not intellectual, it's emotional, and its impact is profound. Because what we are really speaking of is emotional safety, the kind that reaches beyond logic and settles into the body like a remembered truth. When he feels it, he softens. He trusts. He begins to bring more of himself to the relationship, not just the parts he thinks you'll approve of, but the parts he's been told to hide. The fears, the doubts, the old wounds. And in sharing them, not with desperation but with courage, he experiences something rare. True connection. And so, the next time you are with him in that quiet aftermath, understand that you are standing at the edge of his unconscious. What you offer in that space, through your energy, your silence, your stillness, will echo far beyond the moment. If you meet him with love, he will remember it, not just with his mind, but with his soul. If you meet him with absence, he may not complain, but something within him will take note, not out of blame, but out of deep archetypal memory, the same way the psyche records every time it was not held when it needed to be. This is not about tending to a fragile ego. This is about tending to the human being behind the armor. And, when you offer reassurance in a moment when he doesn't even know he's asking for it, you do something powerful. You become the sanctuary where his unconscious begins to feel safe, perhaps for the first time. There is a secret doorway within the soul of every man, a passage that does not open through logic or even love as it is commonly understood, but through something far more fragile and rare: vulnerability. It is the gate through which real devotion enters, and the strange paradox is this: the stronger a man appears on the outside, the more fiercely that gate is guarded on the inside. He may hold the world on his shoulders, command respect in boardrooms or battles, and still tremble in the quiet places of his heart, because deep within him lies a boy who once longed to be seen not for what he could do, but for who he truly was. This boy never disappears. He is simply hidden, wrapped in layers of expectations, wounded pride, and unspoken fears. He walks through life wearing a mask, the persona Jung spoke of, not as deception, but as protection. A survival instinct shaped by years of messages that said, "Be strong. Don't feel too much. Don't show too much." And so he becomes a fortress. He laughs without revealing his loneliness. He succeeds while privately wondering if he is ever enough. And when intimacy enters his life, that fortress is tested in ways even he does not understand. Most women think devotion is sparked in pleasure, or in consistency, or in romance, and to some extent, that is true. But the kind of devotion that binds a man's soul to yours, the kind that roots itself in his unconscious and grows despite time and distance, begins only when he allows you to see the parts of him he usually hides, and that moment does not arrive with fanfare. It slips in quietly, often in the shadows after intimacy, in the softness of silence, or the accidental crack in his composure when he says something that reveals his fears, his doubts, his dreams, still trembling on uncertain ground. When he opens that door, even if only for a second, it is not a test, it is an invitation. A sacred moment where his unconscious reaches toward yours, hoping not for answers but for presence, hoping you will not flinch, hoping you will not judge, because to show one's inner world, stripped of armor and pretense, is the most courageous act a man can perform. And if, in that moment, he is met with emotional safety, with warmth rather than scrutiny, stillness rather than reaction, something profound shifts within him. He begins to associate you not merely with desire, but with sanctuary. But this moment is also dangerous because the slightest hint of judgment or withdrawal can reaffirm his oldest fear, that he must always hide, that even here, in intimacy, he must perform. And when that happens, the gate slams shut, not in anger but in quiet resignation. He may not pull away physically, but emotionally the distance grows, because once vulnerability is punished or neglected, it takes longer to emerge again. The unconscious remembers every moment it was not safe to be seen. You may not even realize the weight of that moment when it arrives. You may not know that his confession, his silence, or his tremble were not weakness, but offerings. You may not recognize that he is speaking from a place he has rarely visited, and that your response will not just affect this conversation, but everyone that follows. Because when a man shows his soul and is met with acceptance, he undergoes a transformation that defies reason. He falls, not into lust, but into trust. And trust is the soil where devotion blooms. Many relationships fail not because of lack of attraction, but because there is no space for vulnerability to live. The woman demands closeness but reacts harshly to emotional exposure. Or the man desires connection, but does not know how to risk being seen. and so they orbit each other endlessly, afraid to land. But those who learn to sit in the sacred discomfort of vulnerability, who can bear the trembling silence, the unspoken fears, the awkward truths, are the ones who find themselves bound by something far stronger than infatuation. Because when a man devotes himself to a woman, it is not because she was perfect. It is because she made it safe for him to be imperfect. She became the place where he could lay down his sword, where he did not have to prove his worth, where he could say, "This is me," without the mask, and not be met with rejection, but with a steady gaze that said, "I see you, and I still choose you." And that choice, when made in response to vulnerability, echoes through his psyche with more power than any compliment or promise. It becomes a thread that ties his emotional life to yours, a thread woven not through performance but presence, through listening when he cannot speak, through holding him when he cannot explain why he hurts, through staying near when every story in his past told him people leave when they see the truth. The beauty is that you do not have to fix him. In fact, you must not. For vulnerability is not an illness to be cured, but a truth to be honored. When you sit beside a man in his pain, in his silence, in his questions, you are not merely comforting him. You are helping him meet the parts of himself he has long feared. And in doing so, you become something more than a lover. You become a mirror to his wholeness. And this wholeness, this return to self, is the deepest foundation for devotion. Because a man who feels free to be all of who he is will fight to protect the place that allowed him to arrive there. He will hold you not just with arms, but with spirit. Not because you needed him to, but because he wants to. Because he remembers how you stayed when he was uncertain. Because you didn't turn away when he had no answers. Because your love didn't depend on his strength, it embraced his softness. This is the devotion that does not fade with time. It is the devotion born not from duty, but from revelation. When a man devotes himself after vulnerability, he is not just giving his heart. He is offering his essence. He is saying, "You saw the part of me I hide from the world, and you loved me there." And in that moment, the gate is no longer guarded. It is open. And from that openness, the kind of love that endures is born. There is a wisdom within, the soul that operates far beyond our conscious grasp. A memory not made of images or linear events, but of emotion, sensation, and energy. While the rational mind forgets, the soul remembers. It remembers every moment it felt seen. It remembers every silence that spoke safety. And more than anything, it remembers the people and the places where it was allowed to rest without fear. In the world of intimate relationships, this remembrance becomes the foundation of something deeper than desire or compatibility. It becomes the foundation of trust, the true root of love. And when it comes to men, who are so often conditioned to live outside of their emotional bodies, the soul's memory of safety is not only profound, it is transformational. A man may walk through life armored, trained from a young age to be unshakable, useful, logical. He is praised for his endurance, admired for his stoicism, and quietly discouraged from asking for anything tender. To need emotional safety, to long for a nurturing presence, feels to him like betrayal of his masculinity, of his independence, of everything he was taught to value. And yet beneath the surface of strength, there is an aching sensitivity, a part of him that still seeks what he was never quite given, the space to be soft without consequence. After intimacy, this part of him rises, not always in words and not always in ways he can even identify, but it shows itself in his breathing, in the way he turns toward you or away, in the flicker of hesitation in his eyes as he wonders, though he may not realize it consciously, am I still safe here now that I've let go? This is not a calculated question, it is a whisper from the soul. It is the echo of a deeper, older need, to be loved not just when giving but when exposed. And in that vulnerable moment, what you offer him matters more than you may ever know. If you remain emotionally present, if you do not rush away, shut down or fill the silence with distractions, he feels something ancient stir within him, the recognition of a place he may have never known, or long since forgotten. The feeling of home. Not a physical space, but a psychic one. A space where he can exhale without performance. A space where he is not needed for what he provides, but held for who he is. This kind of safety is not made of soft words alone. It is made of energetic truth. He feels it when you are still with him, when your presence is undivided, when your eyes meet his not in demand or analysis, but in quiet knowing. He feels it in your touch, not just the touch of the body, but the touch of acceptance. In those moments, something shifts in his unconscious. He begins to associate you with healing, with return, with the rare permission to feel without fear of judgment or rejection. And this is not something he chooses, it is something his soul registers. You may not hear him articulate this shift. He may not say, "I feel safe with you." In fact, he may continue to act with the same armor, unaware of what is softening beneath it. But if you watch closely, you will see the signs. He lingers a little longer. He listens with more attention. He begins to share things once tightly guarded. Not because you asked him to, but because something in him feels, "I can breathe here." And when a man can breathe, truly breathe, he will give you more than his attention. He will give you his essence. It is here where real connection begins, not in passion alone, but in peace. Passion ignites quickly, but peace sustains. And the peace of feeling safe, of being held emotionally, even in silence, binds him to you in a way that is not easily broken. Because it is not rooted in fantasy. It is rooted in the truth of his own experience. The body remembers pleasure, but the soul remembers presence. And what stays in the psyche are not the fireworks, but the steady light that remained when the world went quiet. When a man begins to associate your presence with emotional safety, a powerful repatterning begins. His nervous system, often trained for survival and hypervigilance, slowly learns to rest in your energy. The walls that once seemed immovable start to lower, not by force, but by choice. And in this openness, he begins to transform, not because you changed him, but because you created the space for his true self to emerge. The self that doesn't have to perform. The self that remembers what it feels like to be whole. This kind of safety does not mean you never challenge him. It does not mean you walk on eggshells or avoid truth. It means that even in conflict, even in tension, the emotional tone of your presence remains anchored in respect, in care, in a deeper trust. He senses that you are not attacking him, but reaching for understanding. That your words, even if sharp, are rooted in a desire for connection, not control. And so, even in your disagreements, he does not feel threatened, he feels engaged. The soul remembers who made it feel free. Not the one who flattered the mask, but the one who saw through it and stayed. And in a world where so many men are loved for what they do rather than who they are, this remembrance becomes sacred. You become the anomaly, the place where he does not have to try so hard, the place where he is not measured, but met. And because this is so rare, he may not have the language to describe it, but he will return to you again and again, drawn not by obligation, but by the mysterious pull of emotional safety. This pull is not something you can fabricate. It comes from your own inner stillness, your own relationship with presence. When you are at peace with yourself, when you are not frantic for attention or grasping for control, you create a field around you that others instinctively trust. A field that says you can fall apart here and I will not abandon you. And when a man feels that, when he feels that your love does not depend on his strength, that he can stumble and still be cherished, he remembers it, not with the mind, but with the body, with the spirit. He may not say it, but his soul keeps the record. And what the soul remembers, it seeks, always. Whether in dreams or decisions, whether in moments of stillness or in the chaos of the day, it returns to what felt true, to what felt like home, to what whispered you are safe here. And when he finds that place in you, he will not just love you, he will revere you, because in making space for his soul to breathe, you have given him a gift far more powerful than pleasure. You have given him peace. So now I ask you, What kind of imprint do you want to leave behind? Do you want to be remembered as a fleeting moment or a transformative memory? Because every time you touch his soul after touching his body, you speak to the part of him he's never let the world see. And when a man feels seen in his most unguarded state, that is not just intimacy. That is alchemy, and he will never forget the one who made him feel whole in the silence that followed the storm. If this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. Real love begins after the mask falls. Let's awaken deeper connections, one truth at a time.